and of course, Brian, and I'm sure Barb's probably on too, isn't she?
Barb's on, as is Brandy and Mike.
Oh, okay. And I did see Mike. Okay. The approval of the minutes. Have Bob or Wade, have you had a chance to read them?
Yeah, I read them over. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, do I hear a second? Second by Bob.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call.
Okay, Keller,
Yes.
Cosgray,
Yes.
Hankinson,
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Visitors, is there any visitors on? Besides Mike?
Mike and Brandy and
Okay.
us.
And I'm sure that either one of them, if they have any questions, they can jump in during the meeting. Okay, goals for 2021. We got keep spending within the 2021 appropriation, which, which makes sense. Anybody else have anything to say on the goals?
No, I think it's something maybe we revisit once we get a budget and find out where things are kind of headed with COVID and projects and OPWC funding and all that stuff.
Okay. Old business. I see we don't have any old business tonight. Going into business, review the monthly financials. Brian.
Okay, Chuck. Okay, for this month, I provided you with 2 monthly bank reconciliations, one at the end of December, which I already went over last month, but you have it before your eyes. I went over this in detail last month, so I didn't know if there's any other questions with that. If not, we'll go ahead and move on into January.
Okay.
And
We end up, huh?
And I was gonna say, Brian, you just added this month because we didn't have it print out and you need it to be approved with the motion tonight, correct?
That is correct. I think if I recall last month, let me get my minutes here.
Because you still had stuff to close out, so we couldn't approve it or something, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, you really couldn't prove the reconciliation. No, you could not.
Well,
So yeah, that'll need approved. Yes.
okay. If nobody has any questions on the December 31st or December 2020, do I hear a motion to approve it?
This Hankinson, I make a motion that we approve December's.
It's Wade here. I second that.
Any questions on the motion? All right, roll call, Brian.
Okay, Keller,
Yes.
Hankinson,
Yes.
Cosgray.
Yes.
Okay, motion carry. Okay, now, Brian, go into the January's.
Okay. Okay. Last month we ended up with a ending balance of book and bank balance of $1,855,279.30. And let's see, we only had there was a $5 transfer between accounts. That's the other adjusting factor. We had total receipts of $271,000 last month. Payments of $185,000. One deposit in transit, $864. That was water and sewer. And we had outstanding checks of $31,990. Any questions so far? If
No.
not,
No.
okay, moving on, like I said earlier, after that, you have the January payment listing. All the checks that were written last month, it totaled $185,850.12. A lot less than the previous month.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't see anything in here. There is a $21,000 check to Loeb Electric. That was for COVID. That was with COVID relief monies for the. Terry, refresh my memory of what we used Loeb Electric for. I can't remember now. But it was paid for with COVID relief money.
Okay.
Was it the screen room exhaust at the wastewater treatment plant, Brad?
That I believe so. Yeah, I'd like you to say that. Yes.
Okay.
Area Energy was a screen fan. That was for $11,000. That was also paid with COVID relief monies.
Okay.
Any other questions on the check register?
No, I don't, Brian.
Okay. And the next page, for the Star Ohio, for the monthly report, financial report for January, you only got 3 graphs this time. Since we're still in a temporary, I didn't feel the necessary to put the revenue status as of yet until we got the final, the full budget approved. But Star Ohio last month was $44.22.
It's a big
Rito,
decrease from where it was in January of 2020.
Yeah. Let's see. Rita was $61,802 last month, which is just about $900 shy of the previous year. And for the revenue status, let's see, 1 month out of 12, that should be about what, 1 to 2 months. 1, 2, that's 10%. So right now we're meeting targets right now on the revenue status right now. So we collected, like I said, 61,000 last month in Rita, but 54% or 33,000 went into the general fund. Local government was 2,700 last month. That 1,691 is the payment for the for police services at Pleasantville, and then we collected $11,000 in additional monies out of the 48,000. That would be your everything else, interest and miscellaneous receipts and so forth. So we're way above the curve already on miscellaneous, on all of the revenues.
Well, like you say, we're just in 1 month, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you right now, out of that 11, 9,000 of that was from a rebate from BWC because of COVID relief. We received 20,000 in December and another 9,000, or close to 9,000 in January. That's a rebate from COVID for COVID relief stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew they was giving a rebate on Javier workers' comp and that kind of stuff. I knew that. I didn't know how much, but I see that through the BFW too. So
that's really all I have for my monthly reports. Is there any other questions?
no.
What I was gonna say, what motion, since we're not signing them, Brian, you just need a motion then to accept the report since they already did the reconciliations.
Yes. Reconciliations and, accept everything. Check register, everything. I believe that's everything.
Yeah, Cosgray, I'll make a motion. We accept the reports.
And I'll second it. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, Brian, roll call.
Cosgray,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Hankinson,
Yeah.
Okay, motion carries. I'm trying. Okay, next thing on the agenda. Okay, we did the bank, we did the payments listing, finance report, appropriation report. Did we go
I
over
don't know.
but we didn't
that?
have an appropriation report.
Okay. Income summary.
Or I don't think we would have that one now either, because the ordinance we had that temporarily realigned everything expired. So everything that comes in gets allocated according to that prior ordinance.
Okay, then we're going into the 2021 budget in.
All right. Budget time. And that's why we didn't have anything else set for after this. At a month ago now, the full budget got sent out. At the last meeting, we had that overview 8-page pamphlet I gave out, as well as the summary sheet that, instead of giving all the details, just gives the main line items. So we'd set this aside to talk. Is Rick on yet? Not yet. Okay. Well, since we're set aside to talk about the budget, I did receive an email from Rick about it. I have a question for it, though it kind of makes sense. I'll read the email since we're talking about the budget. Chief is here, so if we have questions about the police side of it as well. But the email I got from Rick said that, and I'm just going to read it verbatim, I can't support a 26% increase in the police budget as things stand today. I love police. I interact with them in 4 municipalities. I have prospective. Count me out on this. I've tried very hard not to make it personal. What's the plan? Hard no on a 26% increase. So, I guess my question for Rick, and we can bring it up in council, though we had set this time aside to discuss the budget, so that we'd have plenty of time, is I don't see anything in here where it's talking about the increased need for police hours or the crimes that are occurring and the need for that safety. And quite frankly, when I think about it now and some of the issues that have been brought up over the past 2 years, when I read a line that says, I've tried very hard not to make it personal, there's obviously something personal going on there. So that, quite frankly, for me, that explains a lot. That's Rick's position on it, I guess. His input on the police side is going to be personal. But for everyone else, let's talk about it. So it is an increase, and we do have the chief on here to talk about some of the increase in man hours and stuff too, and answer questions on that, because the police side is one of the few places where it increased, at least on the general fund side. So,
Mayor, I see where 2020 budget with 305,000. And the 2021 is 384,000. Now, is that broken down? I'm trying to go through all the papers where the increase is.
So the majority of the police increase there is in personnel hours to go up to be able to increase essentially a part-time employee for an additional almost 2,000 hours over the course of the year, Chief?
Yes.
The idea is to be able to get on most days, someone in the village 24 hours a day. Right now, Chief, we're what, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. without someone?
A lot of the times 4 to 8, and depending on the day, it could even be 2 o'clock till 8 o'clock. That's where we're starting to see an uptick in a lot of activity.
And so this increases to be able to get, like I said, it's mostly in the personnel side of it to be able to increase so we have additional part-time hours. Some of that could also be, we occasionally lose officers because we don't pay very well. Quite frankly, you can make more at Starbucks than an officer here can. But it gives the chief some flexibility as well too. Our officers have been at $13 an hour for a long time, so that we could look at increasing some of their pay to make sure we have, so that we retain the good officers that we do have.
They're not here
But then also make sure we have funding to increase for those extra hours.
Are you working?
And Chuck, to go to your specific question, in 2020, the budget was at $35,000 for part-time, and in the 2021 budget, it's just under $56,000. So it's a little over a $20,000 increase there. The other thing we had to add in on police, we also added it in on streets, and we'll be adding it in on, and it needs to be added in on pretty much every place we pay someone out of, is a line for severance. If the chief were to retire, if Tim were to retire, we're going to have some payouts. And if we don't have them budgeted, we could end up with an unpleasant surprise. Happy for them that want to retire and take it easy, but it could be a little bit harder on the budget. So we added on the police side $33,000 in as a severance for should we have any retirement payouts. So that gets added in there as well.
Well,
And then one of the things I tried to do in the summary sheet here so everybody sees, of course, yeah, that's an increase, but the police do also, into the general fund, generate $72,000 for us. All right, sorry, go ahead.
well, I guess I wish Rick was on here so we can ask him, some questions about it.
I'm on.
I want to know what is. Oh, okay. Hey, Rick, I went over your email a little bit ago. You weren't on at the time. And so my question, I read your email to everybody. I guess it put some of the past stuff in perspective for me. I guess my question is because there's nothing in here about increased man hours and increased crime and stuff. You talk about it being personal. So my question is what is so personal that you would not support an increase to make sure we have man hours to patrol the village?
Well, it isn't that. It's that it's 26% in 1 year. And
But
I brought up before that, I've requested the radio logs from the radio room from the sheriff's department. And it's almost like there's no accountability. There's no paper trail or no, police logs. Like, could we get the police log for a particular day just to see what occurred? Because I'm always in the village. Like, I'm always here.
Mm-hmm.
I almost never leave. And my eyes don't confirm what I'm being told as far as coverage. Like, we're just not getting it. And I get it, that takes money. But when I get the police radio log, or when I get the sheriff's logs for the radios, it's like, no, we're not letting the sheriff's department, the radio room, know that we have people on duty. And
I mean, if you're working on something and you can't be available to be dispatched, I understand. But what means of verification or accountability, I don't see it. And I just would like to see that.
Well, the numbers that I put in the overview, 960 computer-assisted dispatch activities, the percentage of them, the priority 1 calls, priority 2 calls, priority 3 calls. I got all of those from dispatch logs. So if you want copies of them, sure, they're there.
If I can jump in.
That's not a problem. I think some of it as well is understanding that, you know, sometimes, you know, you say, oh, this person made an arrest and they should be back on duty. You know, an OVI arrest takes 4 hours. So when an officer pulls someone over, if they arrest the person to take them to jail, you're looking at that officer being gone for 4 hours. So it's 1 call that night, but they're off the dispatch for 4 hours. But if you want those records, I've got a whole stack of them. I have them, I think they're at my law office because I had to get them out of the village office for the new floor. But I've got an entire folder full of nothing but statistics and the log records from Fairfield County Dispatch.
And that's kind of my question and thinking, if I may, it's McCreary. So just curiosity, the percentage of calls fielded by the sheriff's office versus fielded by local.
That I don't know. It's not very high. Chief, was that in the logs that we got to run these numbers?
No, that wasn't pulled. We only pulled our data. The sheriff's department would respond if we don't have someone on duty, and there's been these events where, for an example, we're called to the prosecutor's office, we have to go to court, grand jury, whatever. A call would go out, they would run a backup call here or whatever. Conversely, the sheriff's department will call us at times and request us to handle calls that are just outside the village. So it's you know, a mutual aid situation, but that would be easy data to get.
So those
so
calls
if we
outside
added
of the village would be part of your police log, right? Like what the officer did on January 12th, the history of what the Baltimore police did. You know, this officer did this officer did that, the logs. What the Baltimore police did on a particular day. Am I able to request that just so I can satisfy myself that somebody was on duty and this is what they were doing? Am I able to get access to historical logs of a particular day? Just pick one at random.
Yeah, it's all public record, Rick. I mean, it's not hidden. There's two things.
I don't know where it is.
Well, let me help you with that. So the sheriff's department is our dispatch center. And so anything that they would dispatch us on would be encumbered through that. Now, we are also computer dispatched out of the cruisers. So, and as you know, we just recently got back up and running with the new tower that's up in Walnut. And there were times we would have radio issues, whatever, and then that's another whole issue. But the second part of that is we have our own in-house computer system. So if I go out and let's say I have a car that I'm going to tow, if I tow that car, or if I take action on that car, then that generates a run sheet internally. The sheriff's department does not have the internal run sheets. Those are here for, that's our database. The state of Ohio supplies us with that database because it had got to the point that with a lot of the rules, regulations, things that go on with that we were going to have to look at having someone in here solely for the purpose of administrative duties. The state of Ohio offered this service a few years back, and we decided that was the best way to go. It costs us nothing. And the way it works, each officer has a unique login. They log into that, and then anytime they are taking an action that would require police intervention, whether that's well, anything you can imagine as far as a report or whatever, they have to generate a number, and that number goes on to the report. That's how it's all tied together. Now, the things that it would not reflect, for an example, if we have an investigation that we're working and we are in the building working on that investigation, there is no tracking that says I came in on Saturday for X number of hours. And well, I guess there would be in a way, but I was in here for X number of hours on X case, whatever that may be. Once you get involved in it, you just work till it's completed. The other thing to remember is that a big part of what police patrol is undesignated patrol. It's designed. You should never be in a position that you have 8 hours of a day dedicated to an officer tied up doing something. It totally defeats the purpose of having a person that is on patrol. So that's something that has to be taken into account also. The easiest way to do it is take the numbers, subtract things. You could subtract, for example, officers on a personal break, which could be a restroom or going to lunch or whatever that may be. Although it's actually a police function, I suppose you could take out, like, taking a car to the tire shop to get tires put on, taking a car somewhere for maintenance, something along that line. But the rest of it's relatively easy to find. I generated a report for the mayor, and if you're interested in the number of calls, for example, that the sheriff's department would be here, I can break that down by calls that they are here. I guess the best way to say it is by themselves, because there are times that they come here to back us up, because a lot of the calls you have to have two people go on. And again, back to what I said earlier, there's also a lot of times they call us and say, we've got a call in Thurston, we got a call on Heimberger Road, we got a call wherever it may be, can you go assist our officer? And that's something that we do also. So it's not a matrix where you can just simply say X number of hours per day, therefore we should generate this much dedicated activity. That's not the police. The way the police world works is much different universally. It's not just Baltimore. It's not just the Lancaster PD. It's not just whoever. That's just the way it is.
And when we look at sheriff's numbers, though, Chief, I don't know if when you get them, there would be any way to pull out, but an example would be just this past week, I contacted the chief because I noticed the sheriff's office and Lancaster Police scrap unit were in the village. The scrap unit think of it as local fugitive recovery, for lack of a better word. The scrap unit goes out and they look for people with warrants and they have ideas, and then they circle them around and then they arrest them on their warrants. They don't notify us when they're in doing those. You might see 4 cars in the village for 5 minutes circling around a block. They got an officer knocking on the door because they think someone's there. The person's not there, and then they disappear. Or they might get a lead that they're on the other side of the village and they circle around for a little bit. But we don't know that goes on unless I happen to run across them and recognize what they're doing. They don't notify us of that, but that would be something their logs would show them in the village on. But it's not something they've been dispatched to. It's not something we've called them in on. It's just part of their law enforcement operations and working warrants.
Which
right,
is
Chief?
fine. I mean, we're in Fairfield County. I fully expect the sheriff to be in town as well.
Right.
I just am looking for some sort of documentation that I can just say, okay, on January 12th, who was on duty, what hours, and what were they doing?
Well,
or just pick a day, any day. I'm just picking that one randomly.
Is your worry, Rick, that people are getting paid for hours they're not working? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
I didn't say that.
Well, when you say I want to know who was working on this day and what hours they were working and what they were doing with their logs, in my world, that is something. Those are questions we ask if we're trying. if we're trying to verify someone was working at a certain time or hours, or if they are making a wage crime by claiming unworked hours. And is that what you are looking for?
No, I'm just looking for the record.
Can I intercede for a second? So
Yeah.
from my perspective, if we're talking about a 26% increase, I think that it's a question that should be asked. We just have to make sure, in terms of justifying a 26% increase, what's dictating the need for that increase. So, and I think numbers, what Rick's saying, I don't think that's really inappropriate or.
It's not, and some of it is numbers we can't always come up with. What you can come up with is, in the middle of a pandemic, 105 misdemeanor cases and 19 felony cases, including unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, which has investigation time in it, firearms violations in vehicles, corruption with drugs, counterfeiting, which is an investigation that has time in it. So,
All of that would be part of the police log, right? This is what we're working on.
Not all of it, because when an officer's in, they might be in, the deputy chief, if he's in working on this sex crime case, he might be in, and logged and available for dispatch should someone call in, but he might be sitting in the office making phone calls to victims or doing whatever he needs to do to develop that case. Because keep in mind, our officers also work as detectives.
Yeah.
They have to investigate all of it.
I say something, Mayor. I think maybe some of us might be thinking that, we gave the police chief a 24% increase. Now, did we take some from some of the other departments so we can increase his increase? Then I'm going to ask Terry, because she looks at the budget too with Brian. Are we funding their department enough that we can keep them going and do some improvement in the village?
And I'll let them hop in a second, but we did not take money from other general fund areas to cover that increase. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It's not like, our other general fund areas don't have that much money available. So it's not like we took money from planning and zoning to move up to the police department. And again, because it's a general fund item, we're limited on what funds we can use to fund it with. Because only, 53% of the income tax revenue goes into that fund. And that has to do the police department and cemeteries and all of those other general fund items. So, it's separate from the street fund and water fund and wastewater fund. We can't, because of our ordinance, we can't take money from those to move into here. What it does is it pulls against the, it factors in the revenues they generate, the $72,000 in revenues, and then goes against the general fund portion of the carryover, which I have it allocated out at what? And actually the chief has a $13,000 carryover from 2020. So if you look at police revenues plus carryover, that's $85,000. And that's $85,000 and the increase is $80,000.
Which
So there's
begs
still
the question, if we didn't spend it all last year, why do we need so much more this year?
Well, I guess I guess we can ask that same question in every other department when it happens too, when they have carryover. Why does streets need all of their money if they had $103,000 carryover and we took a bunch of their money for the general fund last year?
Well, and that's
Same
what
with
I'm
water
saying.
fund.
I don't feel right about not spending that money. We took
Well,
it from the residents. We should have used it to do those jobs.
Well,
I'm not saying
so-
the carryover is a
so-
problem. I'm saying that
Well,
we need to spend that money on the streets.
Well, that may actually then support the idea I have of wanting to get rid of that ordinance. So you guys on council, you guys and ladies on council, have the opportunity to each year set those priorities and say, hey, this year we want to invest in parks, so we need more money in parks, and we're going to pave, 300 feet less of street this year, so we can do something in the parks. And then the following year, you have the ability to allocate a little more money to streets, to pave some streets. So that argument goes in well with doing away with that ordinance that automatically splits income tax revenue amongst the three funds. But Chief, what didn't get spent in the $13,000?
Well, most of it was just to try to back that up a little bit. We project out every year, worst case scenario, whether you're police or fire, you have no choice. So a part of that would have been monies that were not spent, that were there for if we needed something, an emergency, cruiser repair, things along that line. The other thing is that, in a strange way, I kind of feel like, we're asking to be penalized because we actually are good stewards of the public money. The old saying back in the day was, if you get a budget, spend it all, because at some point somebody will say, well, you don't need it. And so, you had people going out and buying $1,000 worth of ink pens or whatever. I don't think that's correct. And for everybody that's been,
I never said that either. I never said that.
And I didn't say you did. I'm talking
that a
about
lot.
the difference.
I don't agree with it.
Well, I don't either. But ultimately at the end of the day, and I think I've been here going on 14 years, and I would challenge anybody that's been on council during that time to come up with any point during that 14 years that we have not been extremely careful with our budget. I think as a rule, we've always spent under the budget, which is something that when I look at a budget, I always design in, because again, it takes one major crime and all of that carryover disappears because we have to obviously pay people. The deputy chief and I try to do as much of the investigations as we can, because obviously we're salary. Makes no difference how much we work. That's the reason that he comes in a lot on Saturdays, Sunday nights, and I do too if we're working on something. So, and Rick, you know how that is. You own a business. You don't get paid extra for going in if you have to. So by doing that, we save a lot of money also. We've been very careful about our fuel consumption. We've been watching that closely. But one of the big keys that plays into this too is, if you remember, we still have, and a few years ago, I think 2 years ago now, we purchased 2 newer cars, which greatly and dynamically decreased where we were as far as maintenance on these 100 and some thousand mile police cars. So it's all about having a 5-year plan. When I sit down and look at where we are, I don't look and say, where are we today, or what are we going to do next week? I say, where are we going to be in 5 years, and how do we get there and be financially solvent? So that's the big issue that I have. And I guess the other thing to look at is, if you go back and look, you'll find that the amount of money that is being requested for the police department doesn't even bring us back up to where we were 7 years ago when we had, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago now, when we had the cut. Then when you factor in the $80,000 that the police department generates that it at one point did not generate, again, we're well within the parameters of where I think people would be comfortable with what we spend for our safety services in Baltimore.
And just to give you guys a real world example of what the chief is talking about when he talks about one major crime, if you remember the Roden murders down in Pike County, the Attorney General goes in and investigates that and prosecutes that. And if there were an unfortunate murder here, depending on the level of it, it could be the county that investigates it with the chief, or it could be the Attorney General. But Pike County was looking at up to $1 million in bills for the Attorney General's office and BCI doing the investigations into those crimes. So that's when the chief says it just takes one major crime to throw everything out of the loop. Pike County wasn't expecting to spend $1 million for a law enforcement agency to come in, but when they come in, they're allowed to come in and they can recoup their costs by billing the county or the local municipality for those services. So that's just a real world example of, how a major crime can really throw it through the loops. Hopefully we never have that here.
Mayor, can I interject real quick?
Sure.
Everyone should, except for maybe Bob Hankinson and Jerry and Mike Hamilton, they got paper copies of the budgets. Everyone else should have gotten an Excel spreadsheet. And the first page is a summary page, of course, that's in front of them. But behind that are the projected revenues and the detailed expenses of the appropriations. Yes, the police department's budget is increased by 26%. However, there is a line item called severance pay. That's budgeted at $33,000. If Chief Tussey would pull the retirement or pull the trigger on a retirement this year, that is what's projected. We would have to pay Mr. Tussey out based on our policies. If you work here 10 years, you have to pay him so much on unused sick leave as well as unused vacation leave. That's where that $33,000 comes into play here. If the chief does not pull that trigger and on the retirement, we don't spend that money. So if you take that line out, the actual increase is only 15%, not the 26%. It's 26% because of that $33,000 number. Does that make sense?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then the increase in personnel and other operating costs is only 15%, not the 26 of the total.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
And Brian, what would happen if we didn't budget for that $33,000 severance? If we didn't have it in the budget and the chief pulled the trigger on retirement?
I would be coming back to council to increase appropriations to budget this number to pay him his severance pay.
Okay.
To cover his unused sick leave. So after 10 years of service, the policy says we pay X amount of, percent of the unused sick leave up to a maximum number. That's 960 hours and any unused vacation and probably any unused comp time accrued. So basically, I would have to do a calculation, come back to council and say, hey, I need to increase appropriations in this particular, in the general fund by X amount of dollars to cover his retirement check.
I guess that's the part I don't understand. Why did we decide this year to do that? When we,
I'm not saying he's
just a little bit ago said we should do that for Tim and we should do that for these other departments too.
I've also budgeted for Tim because they have hit the benchmark of years of service in the village that would trigger if they would leave their jobs during this, we would be required to pay them based on our policies. So therefore, prudence says, I think it would be wise enough to sit there and maybe budget for it and have it in there in the budget. And if they don't use it, then if they don't pull that trigger, then we don't spend that money.
So for instance, Brian, when Joey hits 10 years, we would add the severance item to the water treatment plant budget because it could trigger. once he hits that
It could-
that
That's
time
correct.
frame.
That is correct. I'm not saying there would, I mean, if Joey would, if let's say Joey hits that we would be bound to pay him for that. Unless he got a job with another government, he could transfer his time to another government. Then we probably wouldn't pay him anything.
But
Maybe.
if he retired or left service, whatever, we would have to do it. And so because Chief and Tim hit that benchmark, we're adding it in so that we don't have to come back if they pull that retirement trigger, and we don't have to adjust appropriations. We know it's a potential expense from this point
It's a
forward.
potential expense. Yes, that's correct. That's a potential expense.
And the thing of it, if I could just say something, is that when Brian started discussing this, Mr. Foreman, I think he was spot right on. I think it's been overlooked in the past. And as we tried to do our due diligence to make sure we are spending the money correct and we are planning for expenses, these line items, I believe, are necessary. And I think that I think it's a good policy that we have, and I think we should continue forth. But I think Brian was doing his due diligence by adding those this year. I fully support that.
Yes, that was one of my, Mayor, that was one of my questions, because I know Terry has to work at the whole budget, so she can work the whole
Yes.
village. And are you happy with this, Terry?
What I would like, and this is my opinion as a manager of a staff, that like the chief, over the last 5 years I've been here almost now, has taken ownership in their process. Yes, there are carryovers in the street. Yes, there was, but also we have gotten so much accomplished because we have given that responsibility or that ownership to staff to come up with their projects and to manage their budgets. I personally do not want to see that go away. I think we could compromise if someone thinks there's too much going into the street department, but I believe the percentages we have going into those funds are necessary for staff to make those decisions. We start in, I don't know, Brian, what did we start this year? August, September? I mean, we start early looking at what
Yes.
happened over the last year, so when we plan out these projects, and tonight in my report, you're going to see there's something we didn't plan for. And I believe, yes, council has a right to say, I want you to do this, this, and this. But you also have to realize that my team and your team is out there on the streets on a daily basis, and they know what is needed. They know what's going on. And in every situation, when we sit in a meeting, that's just not sitting in a room with streets and nobody else is involved. We involve Barb, we involve Missy, we have everybody's eyes look at it when we start going through projects. And trust me, the project lists are usually bigger than what you end up seeing. But through that process of elimination and feedback from everyone, like, okay, if we're going to put something under the ground here, then let's plan on maybe not doing the streets this year if we're going to put the infrastructure under the ground next year. So I think the ownership that the department heads, and I don't care what department head it is, whether they report to me or not, is so much different than it used to be. And I don't want to see that flame quashed for them to take ownership, because I'm very proud of what they have accomplished and what they're doing. So that's a long ways to say, I like the way it is. I understand, we all work for you, but I believe you got a good team in place to identify those projects, and that if there needs to be any, adjusting of the percentage out of one fund or the other, that we at least, take a good look at it. Does that make sense, Chuck?
Yes, it does. And the reason I guess I'm putting you on the spot, because
That's okay.
because I'm on Park and Recreation, Park Committee. And I know we always talk about if we had some more money, we would do this. And I guess that's what I'm asking. Are we?
And Chuck,
budget so we can take care of the police, but also put maybe some money someplace else.
And again, if there's an opportunity to reduce a percentage and so that we can do those park things. And again, to the chief's point, 5-year plan, which we all, the 5-year plans are what I call living documents because they're going to change based on everything that happens. But when we start looking at those projects and we say, okay, in the park, we would like to do this project, then that's when that percentage difference that we give to streets that we leave in the general fund, we could do.
Right. And that, just jumping on Terry's explanation there, Chuck, that's exactly why I think we should get rid of that ordinance that automatically divvies up the income tax revenue that comes in. Because that's what you said, the ability to do it. Because here, just rounding the numbers example, if we get $1 million in income tax revenue coming in right now under the formula, the general fund, which is police and health, cemetery, parks and rec, planning, zoning, administrative, mayor, council, mayor's court, fiscal officer, and a couple other things, they get 54% of that. So using $1 million, they get $540,000 to work with. Streets gets $410,000. But if we wanted to do a parks project and all of the income tax revenue was left for council to decide, council could say, hey, we want to do $20,000 in the parks this year to do this. And so we're not going to do this project. We're not going to do this project. And instead of streets getting $410,000, maybe they get $400,000. And $10,000 goes to that parks project. We are hampered in the ability to do things in the general fund based on the general fund really only getting revenue from income tax and then instantly taking almost 50% of it away.
Yeah, but I think most council members likes the percentage, and myself, I do. But I like it myself. We asked the public once about the police funding, and they turned us down. So, and I know we've always kept the police around 300,000, and I don't have a problem with 384,000. If they need it, and the village administrator is happy with it, and the councilors are happy with it, that's good. I just want to know, make sure we're taking care of other projects too, not only the police. And I just want to make sure there's money there for everything. Everybody got a piece of the pie. And
Chuck, keep in mind though too, while we're talking, Terry did a good job. I don't want to put her in the middle, because what you're essentially asking, Terry is the village administrator. She runs pretty much everything in the village. The chief, but as like a department head, if we were looking in a private sector thing, she's a department head. She's a COO. But the chief is her equal. He runs the police department. He does not report to Terry. So you're asking one vice president to opine on another vice president's budget.
Well, we're a small town. I think everybody knows what's going on. I mean, I'm not trying. I don't want to put anybody at the bus. Heavens, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that we get the projects done in town, make the citizens happy. One thing we don't want things fall apart when we spend too much someplace else. Do you see what I'm saying? I want everybody to have a piece of the pie, and that it gets good and it gets covered.
And that's why, Chip,
keep in mind that if this, as proposed on the summary here, if the revenues are exactly spot on and the appropriations and what is spent is exactly spot on, in the general fund alone, you end up with a $570,957 carryover.
Yep, I see that. Yep. I always like to have extra money. I don't like to be in the negative.
That's great here.
So, yeah.
Just for the record, I'm okay with the way that the budget's laid out. And I have a question about the original allocation of percents. I know I asked that last committee meeting. Does anybody have any idea the rationale for those specific percents?
The original ordinance, and I did do some research and I pulled every ordinance out there when it comes to percentages. The original ordinance just stated that that was how it was to be allocated. The trouble is that was back in the 80s and there are no minutes to back up that ordinance. Sometimes I can take an ordinance and go to the meeting minutes and look at the rationale behind the ordinance. But in this case, I can't. But throughout the past years, we have went from percentages allocated originally like they are to going all into the general fund for 2 months, sometimes 3 months, sometimes longer, then going back to the original percentages, and then maybe the percentages changing. Now, I have all of those ordinance in one packet. If anybody would like to see a copy of all of those ordinances from the first day that the percentages were assigned to this last percentage that we did when we put everything into the general fund, I can send you that packet so you can look at it.
Now, Terry, so you're saying back in the 80s when they did this, the original percentage was 54, 41, 3?
Yeah.
Like it is now? And
It was
in the
pretty
80s
close.
now, in the 80s, though, Chief, the police force in the 80s was volunteer and reserves, unpaid, correct?
They had, they had a large contingency of volunteer. And then somewhere around here, I found some records from back then. I don't think it was quite a 1/3, 2/3 split, but they had a very limited number of paid part-time.
Was it more like we see in some of the smaller villages now, your paid officer is your chief and everybody else is more or less auxiliary or maybe part-time here and there?
Well, it's kind of hard to believe, but they did not have a full-time paid chief here. They had as a rule, they had part-time, and the part-timers. Now, I'll throw this out, which is kind of it was very odd when I came here. They had a part-time chief, part-time employees, and the only full-time employee was a patrolman who worked day shift. So everything was really, administratively, everything was completely upside down. So, but that's, yes. So to answer that, and that's one of the issues we have today, bluntly. You cannot find volunteers. I can remember even when I first came here that we would always have a list of 4, 5, maybe even 6 people who were looking for an auxiliary commission to come in and volunteer, whatever. Those days have come and gone. And if we do get anybody, they tell you up front, look, I'm in a position, I'm about to lose my commission and I need to sign on somewhere, but I'm still looking. So we bring them on, they're here for a year, 13 months, 14 months, whatever it is, and they're gone. But yeah, the day of volunteerism across the board really seems to have taken a hit.
Okay, let me go back to Wade's question, and I found my analysis that I did. So number one, the first original percentage that established the allocations was in 1978. I cannot find that ordinance, but I have reference to that ordinance. And at that time, the street fund got 50% and the general fund got 50%. Then it was in 82 when they changed for 1 year all of the funding to go into the general fund for that year or until the general fund deficit was removed. Then in 1996, they again went from the 50-50 capital improvement funds earmarked for streets and alleys and 50% general fund to 25% for capital improvements of the general fund, 37.5% to the streets, and 37.5% to the general fund. So I have this analysis that I can send you. if anybody would like to see it, because it seems like every so often the percentages are changed, and we didn't get to where we're at now until 08. And in 08, they said 45% to the general fund, 45% to the street fund, and 10% to the swimming pool. So if you would like, I can send this out if that makes a difference, if anybody wants to see it.
So it changed after 08 then, because we ended up at 54 and 41. So that would be the current ordinance then?
After
In what,
08,
10?
In 09, it went 57, 43, 57 general fund, 43 street. And then in 11, it went 100% general for 2 months. And then it went 57, 43 back. So I'm not seeing where the pool came in here. I know there was, in 05, that's where it went 45 general fund, 45 street fund, 10% swimming pool. And then it just kept bouncing all over. I don't even know if we're on the right track right now. So if you like, I could send this out so everybody can review. You let me know.
Oh, good. Thanks, Terry.
Sure.
Yeah,
Terry.
I tried. It was a lot of work, trust me, because we are missing some of the ordinances. I have to go back through all of the minutes and read through them. And it's I think I think there's no, how do you want to say it? That starting point that has continued constantly over the years since 1970 something. I think it's changed over the years, depending on where the money was needed. But this seems like the big focus has been on streets and general fund. That's a lot of information.
What I heard was that the pool is no longer its own percentage of the general fund, of the income tax.
It was 10%.
Still is, or it was?
Well,
No, it's down to 3.
it's down to 3. And I got to find out where that went down to 3 at, because I don't have that on my sheet.
Terry,
I mean-
that 3% for the pool was just like a couple years ago.
Thank you, Brian. This has been like putting together a jigsaw puzzle with a blindfold.
I believe it was
'cause it
5% when I was here, and it's got changed to 3% here within the last couple of years.
Yes, so I got to find that ordinance. But again, I think it's something that council can say what they want the percentages to be. I don't think we've had a standard benchmark. I think it's just changed year to year based on the needs.
And that's why I say, we have this ordinance, but if council is going to change it every year, then why don't we just put everything in the general fund? So if 1 year streets needs 50% and council wants to give them 50%, they got 50%. If the next year other projects go somewhere else, and the streets only needs, 40%, then they get 40%. Or, or we figure out the percentage of what is the minimum base that we need to maintain our employees and basic operations. We need a minimum, $200 and some $1,000 a year for employees and basic coverage of everything, excluding all the big projects they work on. And maybe that's what we set the percentage at, so that we make sure we have funded the street department, and then the rest of the funds council can say, oh no, we want to do this at Alt Park. Oh no, we want to do this street project, or we want to do this, and can move the money around as part of this budget process every year, as opposed to once the money goes into the street fund, we no longer have access to pull it back out for a project. So to me, it makes more sense to say, let's allocate it.
That's not true.
And
we could pull it back out, Mayor. We just did it this last year. We pulled it out of the street fund and put it into the general fund.
We passed an ordinance, but the money that went into the street fund prior to that ordinance, we don't have access to. It stays in the street fund because it's an enterprise fund. So based on this ordinance, any money that goes in there. So like right now, this year, if our entire income tax revenue came in today, streets would get 41% of that, or 43% of that.
43.
Council has absolutely no ability to say, we only want streets to have 39% because we want to go work on this project over here at the park. That money, once it's in that street fund, is in that street fund. Once it comes in and Brian allocates it. What I want council to be able to do is say, no, we want to put some of that over here and not be hamstrung on only dealing with 51% or 52% of the income tax revenues. I want them to be able to say, this is where it's going.
I just believe staff is doing an amazing job compared to the years before. When I first came on, every other meeting we had to increase appropriations, and it made to me presented a front to the village residents that the village didn't know how to spend the money. And I think we have really stabilized that process.
And this is nothing against the staff. In fact, if anything, the fact that staff has taken control of their budget and their projects speaks even in more favor of this for council to be able to allocate. Because right now, you know, I'm taking water and wastewater aside because they have their own revenue streams. Right now, you look at streets and they get guaranteed income. So it's easy to come up with a project and say, I'm going to spend all that money. But that doesn't give us a lot elsewhere. The fact that staff has taken over the responsibility and become so good at coming up with projects, they can come up with projects and then council can decide based on priorities at that time what projects they want to fund, as opposed to deciding what funding we have projects for, which is how we do it now, at least on the general fund side. On the street fund, it's easy. They get $400,000 of income tax revenue. They get all the other income revenue streams they have. General fund projects, we get 54%. We're stuck. So instead of saying, you know, like I said, on the general fund side, on everything there, right now, council decides what projects are done based on what little funding we have available, as opposed to saying we have this bucket of funds available for all of these projects across water, wastewater, streets, parks, cemeteries, all of them. And this year, our priority is a mausoleum. And doing the mausoleum might mean that we don't pave 500 feet of road outside of an OPWC project, but that's the priority this year. Next year, the priority might be a road. We're going to pave 1,500 feet of road outside of OPWC projects, but we're not going to make any improvements in parks. We're just going to maintain them. Council can set those priorities and then allocate the budget and the funding based on those priorities instead of allowing the available funding to dictate what priorities we have.
Well, Mayor, I can remember before Brian came on, we had all the money going to general fund. And Bob Hankerson, you want to jump in here. We then, it was really very confusing, and that's why we like the percentage.
Well,
Bob, can you say something?
I think the percentage had kept everything in line versus everybody trying to pull out the same one.
Well, I get that, but I guess my question is when I look at this and we see what's available in the general fund and we look at historic carryovers in other areas, yes, we are good stewards of the village money and stuff like that, but we need all of this additional work at parks, at cemeteries. Sometimes they're small projects. Like I said, sometimes we might want to do a big project. Chuck, you're on parks. You know, they need money to be able to do that. We have money in carryover, so we can cover it like that, or we can not pave alleys one year and put in a paved parking lot at Alt Park. You know, what is council's priorities? All I'm saying is yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I would entertain the thought of sort of a compromise position. Instead of putting everything into the general fund, do maybe what you suggested, get a like a basic percentage that the departments are going to need to operate, and then give them a certain percentage of leeway over that, say plus 5% or something. Once you figure out how much it's going to cost to staff and all the basic, just to keep the department running. And then we'll adjust the percentages to that. And
Right.
that would give more to the general fund.
Right. That to me, it works more like, think of it as your own personal accounts. You know how much money you have coming in, and a percentage is set aside for mortgage and rent, and a percentage is set aside for utilities. And then out of the rest of that pot of money, you have to decide, do I put a new roof on my house this year or new siding? And you decide and allocate. It's the same concept here. So, but we're kind of, we got 15 minutes until council starts. We're kind of off topic because that's an ordinance that I want to come up, and we've had that discussion and as part of the budget. But right now we've got the budget numbers that we have to talk about as well, because we do have to pass that at the next meeting. Well, we've got a month if it gets tabled. We've got an extra meeting built into it, but it's something to go. So, you know, like I said, I want to do that. We've talked about that, the percentage allocations, and so we can bring that back. But since we only got a couple of minutes left, Chuck, maybe we should move on and see if there's other questions on budgets and projects and stuff.
And I heard Wade said he was happy with the budget. And after, listening to Terry, I'm okay with it. Bob, what do you think?
It's okay from what I see.
Okay, so I don't, like you said, we got 2 more meetings before we pass this. So to me, it don't look like we need to move anything around in tonight in this committee.
Cosgrave here, I would agree.
And then the beauty of the way this is falling, guys, is at the next meeting, well, Terry's already covered a lot of the service projects, and those are under the more enterprise and special funds. But service is before the next council meeting. So if you guys want to talk about those projects, and those were distributed at the last meeting too, but if you had more questions on those, we still have that actual service meeting to discuss them as well.
Okay. Well, hearing no more about the budget, is there anything else on the new business? I gotta find my paperwork here, so I can get back into the agenda.
That's it on the new business, at least it's listed.
Yeah, that's all I see here on the agenda. So anybody else have any more new business? All right, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting in? Wade, okay, go ahead, Wade.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, and I'll second it. And our next meeting is, which will be, of course, the second Monday in March, will be March 8th at 6 o'clock. Okay, the meeting's adjourned.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording and streaming, everyone. We got about 15 minutes until, actually, I'm just going to pause the recording.